Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to a very special episode today. I've seen my friends do it on different prog channels, so I wanted to throw my hat in the ring and talk about what I consider the best prog albums of the decade so far. So it's about halfway through the 2020s here, so a great time to check in on what I think are the best releases. That might be confusing because it may seem like it's only 4 years into the decade, but it's actually 5 if you include 2020 in that decade list. So it's 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 are the years covered on my list. And basically what I did to compile this list together is look at my individual lists throughout each year of what I consider the top albums. So I think pretty much all of my top 5s of each of the years are represented in this list, but it's all mixed together in some kind of an order. The order is very rough. I could change my mind any given day of what the order is for these albums, but I tried because I thought it was more interesting to give it as a ranking of sorts to give you guys some impression of what albums I prefer and what I really loved and that tops my list here. And so I thought it would be interesting. I just recently gave my big tournament of what my favorite albums of 2024 are. Please check that out if you haven't yet. I thought it was a really fun show and a fun format to talk about my favorite albums. But I thought it would be interesting to see how those stack up against my winners from the past 4 years before it. So this is really a great snapshot of my taste in music, especially over the course of the last 5 years. These albums are all fantastic, well worth checking out. Maybe they're not all to your style and taste, but they all have some great quality material that I would suggest to any prog fan to check out if you haven't heard of these before. And another caveat before I jump in, I did remove a couple of double artists. I wanted it to be every artist only has one entry on the list. So I have a couple where 2 albums from them reached the heights of my list in 2 different years. So I decided to pick my favorite of the 2 in those cases. And it left out 3 pretty major albums that we'll get to when I get to those artists. I think I'll just cover kind of the 2 albums that would be represented and my pick of why I picked one over the other perhaps. So that we'll get into that as we get through it. But starting at number 25, let me shift a little bit and showcase some cool vinyl that I got here. All right, at number 25 on my list, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I don't want the show to be forever long. I think it's more fun if it's kind of a quick shot. And I've done lengthy reviews of most of these albums, and you can see my takes on them in previous years' countdown episodes and such. But for now, let me do a quick shot of my top 25 albums of the 2020s so far. First here, I have Porcupine Tree's Closure / Continuation, which I don't know if it was as warmly received by everyone, but I think it's a fantastic return from one of the premier prog bands that have existed. Prog metal, if you will, has a bit of that tinge to it, but I just thought this album was fantastic. A great return for them. It sparked a great tour that I was able to attend with my dad. Steven Wilson is at the top of his game here. A great group of musicians just playing some really cool compositions. Herzen as an opening track is just super cool and fun to follow with a great bass groove. And there's just so many cool hallmarks of like the classic Porcupine Tree period, you know, of that like in absentia, Dead Wing sort of era is all captured here fantastically well. So I thought this was a great release from Porcupine Tree. At number 24, I have Charlie Griffiths and Tiktaalik. Love this album art, love this album itself. This is a solo album from a member of Haken, who I absolutely adore and love. And I think all their solo albums are absolutely fantastic. This one stood out to me. I was conflicted at first because it does have a bit of like growling vocals, which aren't really my thing. So it dives into some heavier like thrash metal territory, but it still keeps a cool prog edge to it. There's some cool extended instrumental sections like the title track. A cool host of guest artists on it as well, and a mix of clean and growling vocals, so you get a cool mix of cleans as well. He's coming out with a follow-up to this album this year, so that'll be exciting to hear how that goes and if it is in a similar vein of quality as this album. But I just love this over time. I was really impressed. It came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is, but well recommended. An excellent album from the last few years. This came out in 2022, by the way. The Porcupine Tree came out also in 2022. Here I don't have the vinyl, but I do have a CD of OK Goodnight, and their record The Fox and the Bird is my number 23, which I think is a fantastic record. Another one that kind of came out of the blue, and that's the case with a lot of these records, is they came out of nowhere and surprised me, a band that I hadn't heard of before. This is kind of in the vein of, Deer Hunter and more of those kinds of artists, but a little bit of a heavier bent to it as well. There's some prog metal stuff here amongst more of the indie prog stuff that they do. It's a cool concept record, has great female vocals, instrumental sections, beautiful acoustic flavors on some tracks. It's varied and interesting. Each track kind of documents a different animal and showcases their qualities through music, and I think it's really fascinating. So a really premier act that deserves more attention. This is Okay Goodnight, The Fox and the Bird. Next I have Bear Ghost and their album Jiminy from 2023. That's my number 22 record. Love this band. They're just kind of out there and wild. They're throwing in everything but the kitchen sink. It's a lot of energy, kind of some humor and quirkiness here. They do like kind of vaudevillian sections and, classic old school kind of loungy feel. But then we'll do some kind of punky type stuff as well to go with it. It's very fun, very bold, very colorful music, and I just fell absolutely in love with it. It's a fairly short album, but it's just a breeze to get through, and it's just a super fun record that I listened to over and over again and had to put on the list at some point here. Another one, kind of around the same time period, Advent Horizon and their album A Cell to Call Home. This is my number 21 record. I really fell in love with this. It just has a quality to it that I really love. And I know some people argue it's not quite full-blown prog as some of the other stuff on my list. Has a bit of kind of an alternative indie rock kind of feel to it as well. But there's definitely prog flourishes. It has some guest stars on it, like Jordan Rudess, which is a fantastic proggy keyboard solo. And I just found it really fun, melodic, accessible prog. Great vocals, great melodies, and just a fun, breezy listen that I enjoyed every time. Just some of those sumptuous melodies just really grabbed me, and that's what I like in my music. Some people like the more quirky, weird, kind of off-kilter, avant-garde, experimental stuff, but I tend to like the more melodic, the more song-based approach, stuff that has a bit of a pop element, but has enough adventurous spirit to throw in some prog sections, and this kind of fits that bill perfectly well. And hopefully they'll be coming out with a follow-up not too long from now. So, fabulous record, and really love the band. At number 20, I have Toe Hider and their record, I Have Little to No Memory of These Memories. Fantastic, another colorful record, kind of a walk through a bunch of different genres and styles of music from one genius mastermind, Michael Mills. Just fantastic all the way through. There's folky sections, there's harder rock sections, there's some almost funky bits as well. It just runs the gamut. It's like one continuous track. And it's an exploration to a bunch of different heights. His vocals are next level. He does all these like Queen-like Freddie Mercury vocal harmonies, and it just creates a fun journey of music that I just fell in love with as I listened to it more and more. So that's my number 20 record. Love this one and think it's well worth anyone's attention. Next, I have a classic band that I think released one of the best kind of comeback records. This is Kansas and their record, The Absence of Presence. This came out in 2020, and I just really love and adore this record. I think it's a great return to form from the group. They did a really great album before this, The Prelude Implicit, but I feel like this kind of even improved upon it. Great vocals, great kind of classic 70s Kansas feel to it, some expanded pieces as well. Tom Brislin enters the fray and does a lot to bring about his style into it. The final track really has his stamp and kind of gives a unique nature to the record. Love all the violin work, love the vocals, love everything about this record. I think it's fun. It kind of brings Kansas into the new age, kind of brings them into a Spock's Beardian kind of feel. And as a fan of both Kansas and Spock's Beard, that's A-okay to me. I think this is a fun, fabulous record from the past 5 years. All right, number 18, album from this year. This is Big Big Train and The Likes of Us, a fantastic return from the group out of the depths of tragedy, losing their singer David Lungdon, unfortunately, but they came out with a triumphant album featuring their new singer Alberto Bravin. The band kind of picking up the pieces and coming out with something truly stunning. The epic here, Beneath the Mass, is one of my favorite epics of the last 5 years. and there's just so much beautiful music on board. They do a great job of still holding to the traditional style of the band, but adding in enough new fun elements to make it fresh and exciting. The other album I would have considered was Common Ground from Big Big Train, which also placed highly in my ranking. And I love that record as well. It would be just as high as this one. But I favored this one just because of what it meant for the band, a rebirth for them. Most people might prefer Common Ground because they like David Lungden's vocals on it. Welcome to the Planet is also one that was released in this time frame that I absolutely adore. But I just really respect and appreciate where the band's at now, and think they made such a triumphant record here that harkened back to their classic era, to the English Electric albums, but brought it into a new audience and a new age with a new singer and a new vitality. So Big Big Train, the likes of us, at number 18. At number 17, I have Neil Morse Band and Innocence and Danger. This was their big release over the past 5 years. Absolutely still love it. It's divided into 2 discs, basically. The first, the shorter, more accessible tracks, and then the second disc with 2 lengthier epics. And you know I love my Neil Morse, and especially the epics really showcase the best of the band. Beyond the Years is one of my favorite epics from Neil Morse of all time. And I just love the sound of this record. It's just brilliantly done. Neil Morse Band is probably my favorite current active band. Hopefully they're current and active. With Mike Portnoy and Dream Theater, it's kind of been a little dicey, but I hope they return at some point, because this configuration of musicians is absolutely a powerhouse. They deserve a spot on this list. Maybe this is a little bit low for this record, but love seeing them live as well, touring this record, and just love it to death. This came out back in 2021 and was a high contender for one of my favorites that year, but absolutely adore this record and think it's top tier Neil Morse stuff on board. Both the short album and the long album, it all has highlights and brilliant stuff to listen to. At number 16, I chose Prehensile Tales from Pattern Seeking Animals, which came out in 2020. And they had a few albums in contention for this list as well, Only Passing Through, as well as Spooky Action at a Distance. But to me, this is the best of the group. Some people have different opinions about this, but I think this is just the height of their powers. This kind of cool proggy pop makes. The production is just fantastic on this. Some really cool bass grooves from Dave Maros. I love John Baghold's writing. He has this kind of poppier sensibility, but brings enough prog adventurousness to make it fun and exciting for the listener. It has kind of that classic Spock's Beardian feel, but enough of its new sound to not sound like a clone of what came before it. I just love it. I think it's a cool, interesting, unique album cover as well, and just a really cool album all the way along. I love the lengthier tracks as well, and it just has some really cool explorations into some fun, different styles and themes for the band that I absolutely love. Next, at number 15, I have Lunatic Soul and the album Through Shaded Woods. This came out back in 2020, and this is a project of Maurice Duda. He's done several Lunatic Soul albums. I need to really go into the back catalog and listen more to these, but this album in particular is just a fantastic listen. And these Lunatic Soul albums are a bit more ambient, a bit more atmospheric than Riverside proper. And this is no exception. This is kind of the folkier side to the Lunatic Soul sound. And, you know, it has these cool, folky, fun moments, a lot of acoustic instrumentation, and a lot of extended passages that kind of give that ambient atmospheric feel. You know, it feels very calming and very soothing to me. And I think it's just an excellent exploration into this style and sound. Just a beautiful record, well loved by me. And I just have learned to grow and appreciate it more and more over the years. So that makes my list at number 15 here, Through Shaded Woods. Next, I have Ryo Okamoto and the Myth of the Mostrophus. This came out in 2022. This is number 14 on my list. Fantastic. This is like the best Spock's Beard album of the past 5 years, even though it's not Spock's Beard proper. It features pretty much all the members of Spock's Beard on it, singing and doing various instrumentation. And Ryo Okamoto does an excellent job of not stealing the spotlight. It's not just pure keyboard wizardry all the way through, even though there's plenty of great keyboard moments, but it focuses all these other special guest stars and members. It has a fantastic epic at the end that's one of the best like prog epics of the last few years, in my opinion. It's cheesy, it's over the top, but it's fun, and that's what I love about my prog. I love fun albums that just take you on a journey, that are a blast to listen to all the way through, that give you a smile. And I think Ryo knocked it out of the park with this record. I'm hopeful that he'll release another solo record and it hopefully will live up to this quality. He was joined by Michael Whiteman, who wrote a lot of these tracks, who is a member of I Am the Manic Whale, who's a fantastic artist in his own right. And I just love this record to death. Rio knocked it out of the park. I love it. At number 13 from this year, we've got Frost and their album Life in the Wires, a fantastic double album, a concept record from them. Could be their final statement, I'm not sure, but it kind of feels like a culmination of everything that's come before from the band. Has that similar icy production style that they're known for, and I just love this band to pieces, and this is a great culmination of everything they did. Day and Age came out in 2021, their previous album to this one, which also placed highly on my list, but I prefer this one, I think, because I think it just dialed in their sound a bit better. It brought back that classic Million Town feel, has these big epic pieces with lots of great instrumentation and cool proggy explorations. I love the singing from Jem Godfrey on here. It's just a fantastic record all the way through. Every track has something exciting and interesting in it. A lot of different sounds and a cool variety of material here. Maybe you could argue it's a bit overlong and a lot to slog through sometimes, but it pays dividends. It's just such a cool record that is so much fun to get through and listen to over and over again. I just found a lot of enjoyment listening to this record this year, so I wanted to make sure it placed pretty well on my decades list here. Next at number 12, I have Pendragon and their album Love Over Fear. I love this album cover, just fantastic, beautiful artwork. Love Over Fear, I was really high on. In fact, I placed it as my favorite album of 2020 at the time. There's another album that's kind of flown above it since I was talking about this record, but I think it's kind of the culmination of Pendragon and what they can accomplish. Their previous records to this one delved a bit more into kind of a heavier style, almost bordering on progressive metal. But this kind of goes back to their roots as a bit more of a lighter symphonic feel, just beautiful acoustic passages, great extended guitar solos, beautiful work. It just feels very ethereal and sweet and just lighter, and it's soothing and calming. And I think that year, 2020, which was kind of a year fraught with a lot of troubling times and weird things going on, this was a really soothing, comfortable album that really spoke to me at the time, and I just completely adore and will always remember highly and fondly of. It's excellent record. Check it out. Pendragon, Love Over Fear. Next at number 11, I have the Von Herzen Brothers, Red Alert and the Blue Forest. Another fantastic record from the band. They do more of kind of a classic rock style, but with prog flourishes, and I think this album, more than any that I've heard from them, really leans heavier into the prog space. Some extended pieces, some folkier moments, some great vocal harmonies from the brothers. Fantastic work all the way through. They had a new album come out this year called In Murmuration in 2024, but it didn't quite live up to the hype for me of this album because of how much I loved it. It was one of those sneaky albums that I didn't rank highly when I first heard it, but as I kept listening, it slowly rose up the ranks and became one of my favorite albums for the year, and ended up, I think, in the number 2 spot at the end of it. So, fantastic record. Can't say enough great things about it. If you like these extended passages and these cool moments, and there's just a lot of fun quirk to be had on here. They go through a lot of different styles, and it's just a fun record to get through. So there it is, Von Herzen Brothers, Red Alert and the Blue Forest. Next, at number 10, breaking into the top 10 of the year, of the decade so far, Haken and their album Fauna. I know there's some mixed opinions. Some of my contemporaries don't really prefer this album, especially in comparison to Haken's back catalog. Maybe it speaks to my fanboyism, but I thought this was a fantastic record from Haken, who never miss from my perspective, and is just as good as their classic albums. If you could, they've only been around for a short period, so it's kind of crazy to consider some of their early albums as classics to me, but I think this is fantastic. It's a great blend of like their classic proggy style with kind of some newer, poppier elements. I just love and adore everything about it. Elephants Never Forget is like a cool, gentle, giant-y track, harkening back to kind of when they did that back in the mountain. I love kind of the poppierness of like the Alphabet of Me. Sempiternal Beings is a fantastic track. It runs the gamut of everything Haken does well. They really put the emphasis of prog and prog metal, which I appreciate. There's definitely some heavier moments and some proggier sections, but it really knocks it out of the park for me for everything that's great in modern progressive rock, and I hope they continue in this vein. And the album cover is absolutely awesome as well. I just love everything about this package and about this album. And I'll admit, when I first listened, maybe there was a slight bit of disappointment, but as I listened more to it, it just really opened its doors to me, and I love this album. One of my favorites for sure of the decade so far. Number 9, another album from this year. Maybe it's recency bias, but I have a lot of albums from the recent year making it pretty high here, and this is Chyros and their album Mannequin. A fantastic, bright, new, fun prog album that I absolutely love, that brings kind of an 80s synth pop edge to their proggier sound. It's like a neo-prog band like Frost, but mixed with some really brighter, poppier music from the 80s. And it's just a perfect blend for me. And I love the balance between some of these quirkier, proggier, out there sections, but then tracks that really are just fun and groovy and funky, that bring that prog styling, but dial it back when you want something that's just a fun toe tapper and something to bob your head to. It's a great balance. It's fun. It's exciting. I like my music when it's fun and bright, and the album cover perfectly encapsulates that as well. I just think this album got better and better through the year and is definitely one of the standouts for me of this past decade. And I'm excited to see their new direction and where they take it from here. But this is a great, great album that everyone should listen to. A fantastic record. At number 8, I don't have it with me yet. It's actually being delivered today on vinyl, but it's Dilp Robins' Firebird. At number 8, I think it's one of the best things they've ever crafted as a group. Fantastic sounds. I like how they blur the genres as well. They do stuff that's kind of 80s synth style music on this record, but they also lean back into kind of a vaudevillian sound at times. They have kind of this bright power pop sound sometimes, and then soaring epicness like on the Firebird epic closer. So runs the gamut. Is just a fun album to listen to all the way through. I love the male-female vocals from the husband-wife duo who do an incredible job there. So no complaints. I think it's one of the premier albums. They also had Queen of the Night and Dead Horse come out through this period, which I absolutely adore those records as well. But for some reason, for me personally, Firebird just reached another level. I don't hear many other people talking about it quite as highly as I am, so maybe I'm on an island for this one, but just something about it, its aesthetic really spoke to me, and some of the tracks are just earworms that I still can't get out of my head. So really love Dilp Robins, and this is a great album from them. One of the least proggy ones, traditional prog, I think, but I think are still worthy of this list, and certainly one of my favorite records of the past few years, is Nickel Creek's Celebrants. And I'd recommend that, even if it doesn't seem on paper as one of your thing for you, maybe. But I kind of view this as kind of a prog folk album secretly, even though it's labeled as like a bluegrass record. But there's a lot of exploration, a lot of interesting elements. They deal a lot with sounds of dissonance, but in a beautiful, captivating way. It's basically a trio here, a brother-sister combo, and Chris Thiele as well is part of this group. So fantastic sound. I love the acoustic style instruments. It's basically violin, acoustic guitar, and mandolin, and maybe some like bass and cello. But it's fantastic work, great bluegrass sound and style, but done in kind of a proggier approach, kind of a progressive bluegrass record. And every track is fantastic. It has a flow to it that makes it feel conceptual, and every track really hits for me. It's just a really special record that I wish more people in the prog sphere were talking about. At number 6, another record I don't have on vinyl because it doesn't exist, at least not yet on vinyl. This is No Spoon and their record Opus, a fantastic concept record, similar to, it's kind of like the love child of Visions by Haken, and also Dream Theater's Scenes from a Memory. Basically, it has a similar concept to it and has similar style of musicianship as well. This kind of knocked me out of the park, came out of nowhere, and was one of the most fun records to follow its trajectory in the year it came out back in 2023. So had to put it on the list, had to put it pretty highly. I almost picked it as my album of the year, but I just completely love what they do here. I'm excited for the follow-up. It has great and excellent production for a debut record by a band. It really blew me out of the water. It sounds like it could be a band that's existed for 20 plus years. But it's fresh and exciting. Maybe it leans a bit into its influences, but I think they add enough of their own spice and flavor to bring something new to the table. And I'm hoping this is kind of the direction of prog metal moving forward, because this is something that really brought my attention, and I think any prog fans would really love and be able to appreciate and respect this album. All right, we're up to the top 5, and coincidentally enough, this is probably what I'd consider the top album of each of these years, with one maybe small caveat, which I'll get to. And the first one up in number 5 position is Deer Hunter and their album Antimai, another album that maybe I'm a bit higher on than the general public, which people probably prefer the Axe albums to this one, Act 4, Act 5 particularly, but something about this record just grabbed me and made me fall in love, because it took the Deer Hunter sound that I was already a fan of and added this kind of like funkiness and horns and like this really cool edge to it, some cool bass grooves and all of that kind of stuff, and it just really worked for me. And it was fun to hear them expand into a new style, expand into a new universe, so to speak, a new world that they're developing, because they always do things very conceptually. So it was fun to see what the follow-up to the Axe series would be, and it just really knocked my socks off. I know it's kind of more of just a scene-setting sort of album. Each track basically covers a different part of this new world they're crafting, but I just absolutely love the aesthetic of this, the sounds, everything about it is just top tier Deer Hunter for me, and I couldn't get enough of this record back in 2022. It was my number 1 album that year, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And I continue to listen to it this day and be astounded by the fun musicianship on board and what they're able to craft here in an excellent record. At number 4, this is Wobbler and the album Dwellers of the Deep, which in retrospect, I believe would be considered my favorite album of 2020. At the time, I considered it to be Pendragon's Love Over Fear, as I mentioned, but as I've listened more to these albums, I think this one is more of the stunner, the one that really matters in the prog genre, and has showcased them as an extreme talent. I mean, From Silence to Somewhere really broke them out in a big way, but this continues that trajectory. Maybe I like this even a little bit more than From Silence to Somewhere. I don't know if that's controversial or not, but fantastic record, perfect sound for them. It harkens back to the classic 70s prog, but brings in enough of their own aesthetic. It has that Norwegian feel from where they're from. Just goes through so many different cool twists and changes. It's funky and groovy and joyful, has symphonic touches, just great instrumentation. It reminds me of all the best of like Gentle Giant and Yes, and all of the classic prog bands, some Jethro Tull thrown in that mix. And it just creates a cool blend and cool makeup of music, and I can't wait for their follow-up. They're one of the premier prog bands that exists out there right now, and this is pure evidence of it, of their brilliance, and I can't wait to hear what's coming next. All right, at number 3, maybe this is kind of revisionist history here, but it's got to be Transatlantic and their Absolute Universe record, right? This is the Ultimate Edition, and inside it has all the different versions and such, but this is a fabulous record, and it just barely lost out to Mir in 2021 in my big tournament. In retrospect, not knowing that Mir would come out with an even better album, maybe I would have topped my list with this instead. But at the time, I wanted Mir to get their flowers for creating something that just kind of knocked my socks off and came out of nowhere to really impress me. But, Transatlantic's Absolute Universe is a huge, sprawling project. It's fantastic for what it is. And at the time, I was a little bit lower on it because I felt like it was fraught with a lot of infighting from the band. And I didn't like how it was kind of considered the final statement by them, because I just wish for more from Transatlantic, because they're one of my favorite premier prog acts of all time. But I can't deny the brilliance on board with this record. It's just completely fantastic. Some of the best material they've put out. Sometimes amongst conflict comes some really great art, and I think that's the case here. So there's 2 versions of this, basically. Really, there's like 3 or 4 versions, depending on who you ask. But of the studio record, there's mainly 2 versions. The Breath of Life version, which is kind of an abridged version that Neil Morse came up with. There's the Evermore version, which Roy Stolt basically was in charge of, that has more to it. It's kind of a double disc, bigger, expanded project. And then there's the Ultimate Edition that kind of fuses the 2 together, and then maybe you could consider even the live version a different edition with slightly different touches to it. But all in all, it's fantastic material. It's a little bit confusing because it's like, which version should I listen to today? I tend to prefer the Evermore edition just because I'm a fan of listening to everything, and I feel like that's the most complete version. And the tracks that are missing from this are hard for me to miss out on through my listening. Some of my favorite material is on the Evermore version. But the ambition of this project is worthy of an inclusion here. Absolutely adore everything about it. It's one of their crowning achievements. They don't miss. Every Transatlantic album is, to me, a masterpiece, a 5 out of 5 album, and this is no exception. One of the best things that they've crafted. It's unfortunate that it led to kind of maybe their demise and maybe to some infighting. The fact that they did multiple versions probably doesn't speak well to their cohesion as a band, but it led to an interesting release, and I've never come across a release like this where it's split into different versions and had all these different things that you could listen to along with it, and it kind of made for a unique experience in the prog world over the past 5 years. Next, I have this year's album winner, Mir's Wheels Within Wheels, and I know this is probably high for most people, but it touched me deeply. It's an album that I absolutely love and that resonates with me. This is the kind of prog that I enjoy. I love this kind of poppier prog aesthetic. It's what's really been speaking to me lately, and I just love the heartfelt emotion. I love all of the orchestration that they add to this. They have these like violin, viola players that are part of the band, and it really adds an aesthetic. The two lead singers are brilliant. They have great vocals that are emotional and powerful. They have these full-on like Broadway moments that are just exceptional. And this album came to me in a time where I really needed something to pick me up. And that's what music does for us. It picks us up, it lifts us up, and allows us to continue forward in our lives. And this is one of the important albums for my life, to be honest. And I know it didn't resonate the same way with everyone. I think most people appreciate it for what it is, but maybe it didn't top a lot of like year-end lists like it did mine. But it is brilliant, and it's such a well-crafted, just beautiful masterpiece of an album, and I just can't wait to see what they craft next. One of the best groups in prog for me, at least, and very promising, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So what did I pick as number one? I had to do it. I had to go with the tried and true here. This is Moon Safari, and their album Himmelbach Volume 2 is my number one album of the beginning of this decade. It was just the return of one of my favorite all-time groups, and so it came in with a lot of hype, and it exceeded it above my wildest dreams. Like, this to me is their best album, and I love everything about it. Just those beautiful, sumptuous harmonies are just what I live for. I love vocal harmonies above anything else, and they do it unlike anyone else in prog can. And I love the big sprawling epic Teen Angel versus the Apocalypse, which showcases a lot of different facets to their sound. They add a bit of a darker edge at times, but they never sacrifice their cool poppier aesthetic and their symphonic prog leanings. It's the perfect blend. A lot of people call it like if the Beach Boys went full on prog, and can't argue too much with that. I love their sound and their aesthetic. I know for some people maybe it's a bit too poppy, a bit too bright and positive and bubblegum, but I just love it. It's positive, it's uplifting, it's fun. I listen to this record on repeat for months and months, and I never get enough of it. It's just a fabulous record, and my favorite of the decade so far. So there you have it. That's my top 25, a pretty cool list of records. I recommend all of them heavily. They're all fantastic and well worth your time and attention. And the ranking is somewhat arbitrary, and it may change over time. If I do a list like this in 5 years of the official best of the decade, these might be all shuffled in different orders. But, you know, you have to do a video of where you're at the time you're filming, and this is where my head's at today. So that's the list for you guys. Hopefully you appreciated this episode, and let me know in the comments your favorite albums of the decade so far and how you felt about this episode and my list. And remember, it's just my impressions and the albums that spoke to me personally. So sorry if I didn't include your favorite album from the decade. I'm sure I'll get to hear a lot of people's choices, and I'm excited to dive into it and to hear from all of you. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll hopefully catch you in a future episode. Bye everybody. Enjoy the music.